And we are live on YouTube. Happy Friday. Hope everyone is having a great start to their early weekend here. So what's going on in functional medicine world today? So a couple things I wanted to talk about. So when I work with patients initially, we want to have a good foundational diet to start with. So when I see patients that are coming over from like the standard American type of diet, the first thing we're working on transitioning patients to is a paleo template. So what does that mean? That means we're taking foods that may be higher in omega-6 fatty acids, maybe junky fats, maybe excess carbohydrates, maybe inflammatory grains, maybe gluten, maybe cross-reactive grains, maybe things that are high in gut-irritating nutrients or gut-irritating compounds such as legumes, maybe even some of the casein and conventional dairy. And we're trying to cut a lot of that stuff out. So we're trying to really increase nutrient density, trying to increase foods that are really high in nutrition. We're also trying to optimize foods that are really anti-inflammatory, right? Good omega-3s, healthy saturated fats. And then we're also trying to decrease toxicity. So we're trying to also cut out the pesticides, the artificial hormones. So we don't take on those things, and even the antibiotics, because we know that taking on some of the antibiotics may affect our microbiome as well. So those are the first three things. We have to get the diet anti-inflammatory, nutrient dense, and low in toxicity. Those are the first things we have to work on. That's important. So when patients come in on a standard American diet, excuse me, I can get some water. When patients come in on a standard American diet, we really have to make that transition to cutting those foods out. Now, the second thing is we have to make an assumption that you can actually break down those foods. So the first thing we're looking at is, how does your bowel movements look? Are you having bowel movements at least passing 12 inches of stool every day? That's number one. Number two, how does the stool look? Do you see a whole bunch of undigested food particles in there? Because even if we're eating healthy foods, if we can't break those foods down, we're not going to be able to extract a lot of the nutrients and the anti-inflammatory compounds in those foods. And then number three, if those foods are in ourselves kind of rotting and putrefying and fermenting, that's going to be a stressor on our body as well, because the fermentation and the gases that are going to be produced could affect our motility. They could affect our digestion. They could just make us feel really bloated. They could give us reflux. They could start creating an atmosphere for SIBO to be produced, because if we don't have enough acidity, the acidity kind of keeps things. It's like, it's like a natural cleaner on a picnic table, or some bleach on a picnic table. It keeps the environment, let's just say, a little bit more sanitary, if you will. So we want to make sure that we have good digestion there. So the foundation is really good foods, anti-inflammatory, nutrient dense, low toxins. The second step is, how do your bowel movements look? Do you have any bloating? Do you have any gas? How do your stools look? Are they floating? Are they sinking? Any undigested food particles? How do you feel after the meal? We have to make sure that we can break those foods down so we can extract those nutrients as well. So regarding private confessions, right, I'm not a big fan of supplements. Are they absolutely necessary for digestion? Well, if you have poor digestion, for sure. A lot of people with stress and or just gut bacterial issues or gut infection issues, they may have low stomach acid, and low stomach acid is the precipice for low enzyme levels and also low bile salt levels. So it's very possible that that is the case. And I think that's the low-hanging fruit in all supplements, because the goal was, people say, well, we want to get our nutrition from food, right? Well, number one, that's already harder to do just with our stress and with our food supply. But number two, if you can't break down that food, if you can't ionize those minerals, if you can't break down those fats and proteins, well, now you're doubly screwed, because now you're not going to be able to absorb, assimilate, and utilize them. So I think if anyone's a minimalist when it comes to supplementation, acids and enzymes are going to be foundational to make sure we can extract nutrients. Hope that makes sense. Any other questions? Feel free and let me know here, guys. This is a live Q&A, so look forward to answering y'all's questions. So next step is, some people also come in and they have other issues. They may have significant bacterial overgrowth. We may need to cut out fermentable carbohydrates, because the carbohydrates that are in these type of even healthy carbohydrates like broccoli or cruciferous or onions, they may be feeding a lot of this dysbiotic bacteria that could create more bloating, that could create more gas. So we may have to even cut out foods that on paper may look really healthy. And if you're coming over from a standard American diet, you may be like, hey, I'm eating really good, but you may still notice that bloating and that gas. And that may be a next first important step to take to address these issues. So Anita writes in, is there a test for SIBO? Yeah, there's a couple tests. I mean, the main test is going to be a breath test. There's a biopsy test as well, but it's kind of invasive. But the breath test, where you swallow the 10 grams of lactulose solution and you measure gases at baseline, and then 20, 40, 60, 80, 120 minutes, up to 3 hours after the test, you measure these methane and hydrogen gases. And based on the time in which these gases pop up can tell us if there's a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And these gases increase because they're typically not digested. So if they're digested, that means the dysbiotic bacteria is eating these and they're kind of passing gas inside of your intestines, and they're passing the hydrogen and they're passing the methane, which is then showing up in the tubes that you blow in on a breath test. Hope that makes sense. Good supplements that lower cortisol. So, I mean, we have things like adaptogens that are going to be very helpful, like ashwagandha and holy basil. We have adaptogenic blends like rhodiola, ginseng, ashwagandha, eleuthero combos that can be helpful. That combo is in my Adrenal Revive. Also, ashwagandha supreme can be great. And then things like magnesium, GABA, and L-theanine can be very calming and relaxing. And then also just making sure, like, you're not skipping meals, you're managing stress, you're eating in a quiet, calm environment, you're getting adequate sleep. All of those can have a huge impact on lowering cortisol. Also, making sure you're infection-free. Infections have an opposite sleep and wake cycle that we do, so they may create more inflammation at nighttime. That inflammation may spill over and cause cortisol increases in the morning. Okay, good. How do you gain weight while taking Ritalin? It blocks my appetite. Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't be on Ritalin. Why are you on it? If you're on it because of focus and cognitive stuff, well, why? You should be able to have good cognitive function without that. So I would look at making the changes to get to the root cause of why the focus is not there. And I would use natural supplementation and amino acids to fix it. I'm on a low paleo Fodmap diet. Is it okay to consume stevia? Well, a lot of stevia has maltodextrin in it, and that's corn. So you have to be careful there. Number two, you have to go look on the Monash University. I think stevia may be okay. It is an herb and it is used in smaller amounts. But if you notice adding it in causes bloating or gas, then we'd want to pull it out. But I'm not sure exactly. I think it may be okay, but double check on Monash University website. How to control sugar through diet. So first off, carbohydrates are these three major macronutrients: proteins, fats, and carbs. Carbohydrates come in 3 to 4 major categories. We have lower sugar fruits. We have higher sugar fruits. These are a lot of fructose in there. These will go in and they'll get processed and handled by our liver. Okay, our body will have to make insulin to help put these fats and to store them into our either our liver, and then typically after that, if once our liver's full, fructose primarily goes to the liver. If not, then it will go to fat. So your body's making insulin to then kind of allocate and partition where this fuel goes. We have carbohydrates that are more starch-based. These is like potato, sweet potato, squashes. These tend to go more in the muscles. We have about 5 times more reservoir allocation or size in the muscles than we do in the liver. So the muscles are a bigger place of carbohydrate starch reservoir. Plus we burn these carbohydrates up when we work out. That's why working out can really help with insulin resistance, because it wrings out that sponge, so that sponge can now be used again to sop stuff out. And then when we do resistance training, we can also make that sponge a little bit bigger through hypertrophy. So we have low sugar fruit, high sugar fruit, all fructose primarily goes to the liver. We have our starches. We have squash, sweet potatoes. We have plantains, right? These are our big things that we can utilize on the starch side. And then we have our non-starchy vegetables, which are very little sugar, that tend to not have much of an effect on our blood sugar and our insulin level. So the goal is to do more of the non-starchy veg and then dial in the fruit and the starch according to what your carbohydrate needs are. The more overweight you are, and the more insulin resistant you are with blood sugar issues or high fasting insulin levels, we go more to the non-starchy carbohydrate, and we do more healthy fats and moderate healthy proteins to counteract that. Okay, guys, let me find out where I was at. Okay, is it okay to skip a meal if you're not hungry? It depends. If patients have health issues and blood sugar issues to begin with and hormonal issues, I typically say eat every 4 to 5 hours. If you're healthy and you're doing really well, and you're getting enough nutrition during the day, then doing some intermittent fasting or skipping a meal occasionally, I think is okay. Oliver writes in, I've got pathogenic levels of Klebsiella and Tetrabacter. My practitioner recommended uva ursi tincture for 2 weeks. What would you recommend? I mean, uva ursi is a good herb. I use that in a lot of UTI infections, but would I do that by itself? No, I would probably do a combination of other herbs, golden seal, berberines, oil of oregano. I would typically do a combination of my GI Clear 1,4 and or 6 or 1,4 and 5 for those type of bacterial overgrowths. Private Confessions writes in, I'm 18. I've had yellow stools for a long time, tried everything, nothing works, losing muscle, dry skin, feel cold all the time. Yeah, you're definitely not digesting and absorbing. Sounds like low bile salts, probably low enzymes and low acids. Got to get that fixed as well first. Got to cut out the bad foods and got to work on getting some gut testing to see if there's any infections as well. If reflux is from too little stomach acid, then why does acidic food cause a problem like coffee and tomatoes? It causes a problem because your gut lining is thin. You may have atrophic gastritis, meaning the gut lining is getting thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. So it's like getting a massage when you have a sunburn. It's just a little too much for your gut lining to handle. Sam Lee writes in, I cut out gluten for 2 months, elimination diet. And when I introduce it back, literally nothing happens. Does it mean I'm not sensitive to eat? Was 2 months enough to figure this out? I mean, here's the deal. If you're able to tolerate a little bit of gluten, there's nothing from a nutrient perspective in gluten that is superior. There's still other compounds such as Roundup and other potential lectins and gut irritants. If you could tolerate gluten and you're 100% confident in it, I would still put it in that, 90-10, that 90% you're off it, 10% maybe you have a little cheat. I always try to go to a gluten-free type of food. And again, it depends. If you have other symptoms going on that may have gotten better, a lot of people look at gluten as, oh, well, it didn't cause bloating or gas or diarrhea or constipation, so I'm fine. Yet they may not be aware of brain fog. They may not be aware of fatigue or mood issues that it could have caused. So you really have to be careful with that. It should never be a staple. Are non-gluten grain, oats, millet good for carb backloading? I would always go to better grain-free, safe starches personally. I'd always go to the grain-free, safe starches just because of the gluten sensitivity component. You can still get the carbs you need, not going to grains. I always err on that side. Riley writes in, Dr. J, how do you cook your veggies if you can't handle raw? I mean, I can't handle them raw. So if I do them, I will do them on like a salad, for instance, myself personally. But if not, I just steam them. Squash, sweet potato, I'll bake those a lot of times, but then I'll do broccoli, green beans, kale. I'll saute the kale. Green beans, I will steam. Asparagus, I will roast in avocado oil. Kale, a lot of times I will just roast it. So that's kind of how I handle that. Keep it really simple. Either roast it higher, 400 degrees with avocado oil, or I'll steam it or saute it on the griddle with coconut oil. Once the infection and pathogens are gone, does that mean we can eat more variety of foods? I mean, you definitely can eat a variety of foods even with a pathogen, present. We just want to choose healthy anti-inflammatory foods. I think if you love it, rotate it. I think it's good to have some variety even when you have some digestive issues. Just make sure you're eating what you can handle. Wonderful Girl writes in, what to do in order to help pulmonary embolism recovery? From my mother taking Xarelto and anticoagulant every day, root cause fracture, L5 1 year ago, and Parkinson's disease. So there's definitely some autoimmune stuff going on. So I would make sure that we're on an autoimmune template. That'd be one of the first things I would do to help calm any inflammation and leaky gut. Concerned about the L5 fracture. If there's a fracture there and we look at the mechanism, how was it caused? If it's kind of like a chronic wear and tear mechanism, it tells me that her lung, we probably need to get some really good amino acids and collagen peptides in her diet, supplementary wise. We probably need to be doing bone broth as well. We probably need to be working on her digestion. If there's a pulmonary embolism, you're on some blood thinners, right? I would potentially use systemic-based enzymes as well, like a serrapeptidase, but you have to be careful. If you're already on blood thinners and you add in more enzymes, that can make your blood too thin. So you'd have to work with your doctor on that, on adjusting the blood thinners down if you're going to do systemic-based enzymes to help. But you'd want to get the inflammation out. Why is the inflammation? Clots only form when there's more inflammation going on. So you have to get the inflammation down and get some good healthy fats in there to help naturally thin the blood like the fish oil, but you have to make sure your prescribing physician addresses the medication so the blood does not get too thin. That's a common mistake that's made. Eating fruits in the morning fast can regulate sugar. Eating fruits in the morning fast can regulate sugar. I typically do proteins and fats in the morning, or an intermittent fast, or you could do a bulletproof coffee intermittent fast. I typically wouldn't just do fruits by themselves. Alamo writes in, I get heart spasms. I believe my electrolytes are out of balance. I can't seem to know I'm depleted until it's too late. Are there any home gadgets to measure electrolytes? No, I would just make sure you get some good supplementation on board, a good multi that has some minerals and electrolytes. And I'd even get a trace mineral support product like Endure or Concentrates by Trace Mineral Research. And there are some good like sea salt, like Redmond's Real Salt, add it to your water, add it to your food, take some extra minerals from the Trace Mineral Support, and that should be a good way to do it. And then just make sure you add a little pinch to your water, or you're drinking sparkling mineral water. Sarah writes in, my husband worked 80 hours a week, is always sore and exhausted, but won't slow down. I'm an NTP, and I have him on Bio B with G and Tenzyme Forte and ADHS. Is there anything else that will support adrenals? Well, if he's working that much, his diet has to nearly be perfect to not break down. And he's going to have to be getting at least 6 to 7 hours of sleep. I mean, that's it's really difficult, because if you're working 7 days a week at 12 hours, that's 84 hours a week, right? So let's just assume he's doing like a 7 to 7. It'd be really important that he's getting to bed, before 10. And that's kind of a unsustainable schedule, but make sure he's getting to bed before 10. Make sure his food is perfect. Of course, anti-inflammatory nutrients like you're doing. And I would also be adding in adaptogenic herbs, extra B vitamins, and mitochondrial nutrients like CoQ10, magnesium, carnitine, creatine, those kind of things. But his diet and sleep will have to be perfect for him not to burn out. Not sustainable in the long run, but you can manage it more with just perfect eating and perfect sleep. Private confessions, please make a complete podcast regarding yellow stools, going into depth. Yeah, poor digestion, gallbladder issues, infections, low stomach acid. That's the kind of the Reader's Digest version there. What's the best way to kill Giardia? Combination of good killing herbs. Go through the 6 R's, remove the bad foods, replace the enzymes and acids, repair the gut lining and the adrenals, remove the infections. There's various herbs I use in my line, Giecler 1, 4, 5, or Para 1, or Giecler 6, or pure wormwood. Again, if you're just going after the infection and you're not managing all the things that lead up to that 4th R, the adrenals, the food, the sleep, the digestion, you're gonna get reinfected with something else because your immune system is too weak. So we really have to make sure we take the time and work up to that killing phase and not just jump into it. Are those in the carnivore diet who say they cured their stomach bloating by stuffing vegetables, just putting a Band-Aid on things? Or do you think they can go back to veggies at some time? I think, number one, the carnivore diet can have some help for people that are incredibly autoimmune sensitive or incredibly bacterial overgrowth, where they're just any type of carbohydrate is feeding them. I think there can be a palliative way where it's starving things out. Number one, I think starving it out can be helpful, but wanting to follow up with killing herbs to help kill it out can be helpful. And then just adding things back, starting with lower FODMAP type of carbs and making sure they're cooked and broken down so you can handle them very well. Can taking omega-3, 6, and 9 bring down sugar? I mean, good healthy fats can be really helpful for sugar because they prevent they mix in with all the food that you're eating, and they prevent blood sugar from going high or low because it's like a log on the fire. So it slows down the absorption. It kind of time releases some of the carbohydrates that you are eating. So that makes a big difference. Rebecca writes in here, are there any cofactors that one has to take with B12 hydroxy, B12 MTHFR levels, B12 level at 221? Yeah, so your B12 levels are super, super low. So number one is I'd make sure that you're doing a good quality B vitamin that has B12, methylated B12 and or your other adenosine or hydroxyl if you're really MTHFR sensitive there. Activated folate, B6, choline, B1, B2, B3, just the whole gamut there I think is going to be really helpful for you. Let's see here. Varushka writes in, diet recommendations and solutions for chronic acid reflux, no medication working, palpitations, anemia, body weakness. And yeah, you got to do enzymes and hydrochloric acid. You got to make all the diet changes and you got to fix the infections. Any test to be done for floating stools? I mean, a comprehensive gut test to look at infections. We already know the steatocrit's probably high if they're floating, right? That's our clinical test. So we have to make sure the infections are addressed. What are some random causes of red splotches on skin in different parts of the body without itching or burning? That could easily be cherry hemangiomas, which could be caused by estrogen dominance, not metabolizing your estrogen. And then the estrogen manifests with these little hemangiomas. All right, guys, I got to run on to a patient here. Hope you guys have a phenomenal Friday. Give me a subscribe, pound the like button here. Give me a share. Give me a comment. Any questions, we can come in later and answer them for you. And then make sure you hit the bell for notifications so you get notifications when I do these live talks. All right, y'all. Have a great weekend. Take care.